1/3 cheaper per a million gallons than what we pay from Andover. So as the town currently now produces 1/3 of their water and buys the other 2/3, our infrastructure is aging. It's 50s technology. We're going to have to either sink money into our water supply, the source of water, or we're probably better served getting it from somewhere else and not investing that in the ground. So we're looking at comparing those two alternatives. And gut feel is probably, from a continuity of supply standpoint, the MWRA was designed, they make about 300 million gallons a day, and they're only selling about 200. So their debt service is based on 300 million gallons a day. So they are very actively seeking people to sell water to. We are currently, we have had an initial meeting with the town of Reading for the purpose of what they call wheeling. The water would come from MWRA through Reading to us. And the long-term solution would be a pipe from MWRA through Reading to us, solely for our supply. I have a draft letter to Greg on a meeting to talk to the town manager there just to start the ball rolling.
We're going to tear up Haverhill Street again? Anybody been down Haverhill Street, Reading? I know.
Well, on the sewer side, two major things we're doing. The comprehensive wastewater management study that was done, a review of that, since that was done over quite a long period, in my experience, it's so many little pieces. C, A, is that it's so valid, some of it's pretty old, and B, are there any gaps, in their opinion? Just kind of a second set of eyes looking at it. And since this project is in the order of $50 million, plus or minus, to have someone else take another look at it just to make sure we didn't miss anything. It doesn't say anything about the prior consultants or the committee, but sometimes stuff, just after you look at it for too long, you just can't put your eyes on it, number one. And number two is we're looking one more time at if we could eliminate the sewage treatment plant and disposal in town, that cuts our project cost in half, from $50 million to $25 million. Where would that wastewater go? It could go north to Lawrence, it could go east to Salem, or it could go south to MWRA. We're looking at those numbers. Right now, based on our conversations, MWRA is the most expensive of all three options. There's a substantial buying cost, and any problems with capacity downstream, the town would have to fix. It's very expensive. So we know that right up. And this study is to kind of refine those numbers, which was done by Weston and Sampson about 5 years ago, already, just to refine those numbers one more time. I know personally the sewage plant in Salem was designed for a very limited community, so I know they don't have capacity, so that's probably dead on arrival. And the consultants have already met with them once. And probably the only viable option is north through Andover to the Greater Lawrence Sewer District. Concurrent with that is the DEP will not let us have a net export of water to the basin. So if we take out sewage out of the basement, east, west, north, or south, we have to bring in an equivalent amount of water, which kind of led to the MWRA. So to make that mass balance work, that all has to play together. Because they will not, well, we all know this, people that are dealing with the DEP, they will not let us export any water out of the basin to have a drought, to have a deficit. So those are the major items, looking at those two aspects. And probably after the new year, we can have a little more details. Quite a detailed breakup by task and time. And it's a long project. It's 10 plus years. A lot of permitting. This is a major project to move water from one basin to another. It's substantial work. It's not as simple as just throwing a pipe in and getting permission to turn the valve on, unfortunately. So that's where we are right now.
I mean, we haven't really gone through the recommended implementations from them. I don't know if you want to do that now or you.
Sure. Unless there's more questions for Dick at this point.
As part of the study, number one, put in context, this study started after our problem of summer of 2010. Currently now, with the River Teledyne property is right on our property line, they get water through Wilmington, and it was a special arrangement. They suggested we see if we can get that line extended up Concord Street, if that's possible. We have had conversations with the MWRA, all the way up to Fred Lasky, who's the director, the head guy. And there's some cost involved with that. We would still own something downstream. It's not as simple as just laying some pipe in, unfortunately. So we've already been working on that. Number three, the best cost benefit. We have estimated cost to put the sewer in. The benefit is you can kind of figure out from the zoning how big of a footprint you can do. You could put average wastewater or water use to that, and you can figure out what your need is going to be and what your revenue is going to be. So that's relatively easy to, excuse me. That's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. So we're still working on that to come up with that number that somebody asked earlier about. If we build this, how much more water do we need? Trying to figure that out, and it involves a lot of educated work. Traffic study, if we bring in more businesses that have a lot more traffic, like a light industrial or a research place or a hotel, a lot of traffic causes a lot of problems, need to be addressed. And let's see, 5 and 6. 6 is basically taking the current, start with 6, the current comprehensive wastewater management plan calls for building the common core first, which is the treatment plant and disposal, and then go to Martins Pond first. I believe it's Main Street second, Concord Street, the third or last in downtown. So it's kind of, in a sequence, it's not what we want for economic development. So they're considering maybe try to move that around. And funding for pre-development planning, that's we're doing now essentially through Wright Pierce. So a lot of these things on a parallel path have been going on. So.
Dick, as I recall, the Martins Pond area, covering that first was primarily the pressure the DEP was putting on the community related to the wastewater discharge, of which some seeps into the pond.
Through our consultants, we've had conversation with, kind of off-the-record conversation with some of the DEP officials and EOEA, and they don't seem to be as hard-lined about that issue as they were before. It's not a guarantee anything could happen, but they seem to be a little bit more flexible in the realities of municipal finance. Seem to be. So we are cautiously optimistic.
So meaning that if we submit a plan, that as long as it covers Martin Pond at some point in the plan, that they're not going to get in our way of executing that plan?
I can't guarantee what the DEP will do, but our approach would be what makes it work economically for the community, and obviously that would have to be a piece of it.
Warren, were you going to come in?
Just the two things we did on the wastewater committee. We did approach the DEP about that, and he's correct. They did understand that economically it was going to make more sense for us to get a district in place, so that we could get, because the businesses would be more likely, would have a higher need, or have a real need for it, as opposed to the Martins Pond area wanting to be done for environmental reasons. The businesses out there, they would have a need, and so that means they would fund it. And the idea was to get funding into it so that we could get the thing built, get it constructed. So they were in fact amenable to, at that time, to allowing the district to be developed and the commercial portion to be begun, as long as the environmental portion, that being the pond, was in there. The other thing they wanted to make sure was in there was that the public buildings were in there too. That was one thing they looked for, was to make sure that we hadn't excluded our public buildings, that they were also in the plan.
And speaking of the public buildings, Public Works met with the high school, middle school consultant group, and examining the possibility if we could have a common wastewater system that would bring in all the schools, all the public buildings downtown. The benefit to the town would be we'd eliminate the need for septic systems everywhere and the constant failure and replacement. And it would, potentially the town would take over that from the school to run it, since we're going to run a sewer system. That kind of makes like a logical first step. And it would keep the school's operating costs down by us running it. There would obviously be a charge back on a flow proportion basis or something, but I don't think the schools want to get into the wastewater treatment business. So it has some benefits. We're trying to work that out somewhere by mid to late January to say, does it really make sense? The people in the meeting seemed interested, but it could be benefit the community, it could be benefit for that project.
This was the result of last week's meeting?
Yes, sir. So we've had their wastewater consultants and our wastewater consultants have been talking back and forth. They've also talked to the DEP about the sizing of it is it's kind of an art, frankly, rather than a science. take what you use and double it. That's what they do to size the things. Doesn't seem too high-tech to me. But they've already had the conversations, and it seems like they potentially could use the plant they've sized now, in the thing they've proposed, to take everything except the housing authority, realistically. So it may be feasible.
Yeah, it is.
Our cost to pick up all those buildings, just envision the lowest spot is near the police and fire station. You'd be a pump station there. Everything would go downhill to a pump station and pump it up to their facility. Something as simple as that. The housing authority, because it's housing, has a high water use compared to police, fire, library, and all that. So that kind of kicks us over the edge. So not to say that what the DEP said was, if we build everything to take the municipal buildings and then have some track record, and perhaps that could be hooked in as well. That'd be another source of revenue to help run that thing to keep the overall cost down. So that's another task the consultants are working on. And kind of, we know it's a tight timeline. We know when they want to get before the board and the town for a special town meeting. So we're working to try to get that staffed, see if there's an interest, see if it makes sense financially.
It's good to hear there's a connection now with the architect and engineering firms involved with the school project.
They've been very open, very forthcoming. I've been very happy with the back and forth so far. We're also looking at if we could take all downtown and send it along the railroad bed through PVD to the Salem plant. I'm pretty sure that's not going to work, but that was actually the original plan in the 60s that the town decided not to do. They were going to extend that pipe through PVD all the way here and pick up all the sewage. So I've literally seen the plans. They still exist.
What you've told me and others is that the capacity of the pipe is adequate to handle the town. So,
The treatment plant itself.
Right.
When they built the plant originally, it was 41 million gallons a day in Salem Willows. When they were required to build a secondary plant, that was only built for 28 million gallons a day. So it downsized
secondary
it.
treatment plant that's inadequate.
So our flow, however, is minuscule. It's nothing for that area compared to that. So there's a new mayor in Peabody starting in 2 weeks. I just happened to work on his campaign, so I have access to him. So to ask that question. It would cost Peabody nothing to wheel through the community. Because I used to be the director there. I know there's no cost. It's one pump station. The pipe is adequately sized. So it involves expanding. It's a legislative thing. You have to expand the boundaries of the sewage district. It's a whole legislative process. It's not as simple, again, as just building the pipe as well. But we are looking at that. Because ideally for everybody downtown, if we could do that and eliminate the sewage plant, that could be a win for everybody.
Going down that route, then, that would be a sewer district where the bills, you would get billed from the town of Danvers?
No, this would be, as part of the South Essex enabling legislation, they have to have legislative approval for who can put sewer into that system. So it would still be us. We would be,
Would still be.
we'd be the wholesaler, or how, for example, the jail in Middleton, they were like a separate customer. So they got a part of the operation and maintenance cost and part of the debt service. So we'd probably be a piece like that. That's how it's usually structured. And that would figure into the operating budget of the water department. One good thing, since we have a water department, to add the sewer, we already have an administrative staff. So we're not replicating that. So that really doesn't cost us anymore at that level. And since we're so small, in-house employees versus contract operations, it's probably better, we could look at that, but it might make sense just to do contract operations. Maybe contract with Peabody or another community to run it for us, rather than hiring more employees to run such a small system. So there are options to staff it, and that's not an insubstantial cost to staff and run these things.
So have you discussed from the school point of view, if the school project goes forward, I imagine that by the time they need wastewater, we're not gonna have anything in place. Even if we went forward, we're able to go forward with the Danvers connection?
Probably not.
Yeah, we've made that
So-
clear to them.
Right.
Yeah, we've been very clear with them.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So basically, if we knew we were gonna go forward at the time that they needed to put in whatever, would that be done differently, knowing that they could connect to it in the future?
Unfortunately not, because their timelines are much faster than it would take to get this going. And this happens in a lot of communities. When I was in Peabody, literally, they built a sewage treatment plant for Peabody High, and then 2 years later, the sewer came by in Lowell Street, and they abandoned it. So it has happened, and it's two different funding sources, DEP and DOE don't talk to each other, unfortunately. So the reality